The Peppercorn. And by Blackjack's Pizza.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's program. I'm Jann Scott for the next hour. First up, we're going to talk to Bob Greenlee, who's our mayor, and he's also running for Congress. And then in the second half, we're going to talk about violence and TV news, where we went and called a bunch of television news directors. Rocky Mountain Media Watch filed suit with the FCC against 4 TV news stations, so we'll be talking about that later on. But first off, Bob Greenlee served on City Council for 14 years. He was elected this year as mayor. He's now running for Congress. He started KBCO in the Peak, sold them, is in the gaming and restaurant business, and he is Boulder's most famous entrepreneur.
Hi, Jan.
Hi, Mayor.
How are you?
Mayor Greenlee.
Yeah, Czar. I prefer Czar.
Czar. Czar Greenlee.
Well, sure.
Yeah. Well, Leslie Durgan, we always used to think of her as, what was it?
Czarina?
Her lordship, Czarina. Her worship.
Your turn.
Okay. So you're running for Congress.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk a little bit, though, first of all. When did you come to Boulder and you started?
Diane and I moved to Boulder in 1975.
Yeah.
In fact, we arrived in Boulder on Election Day, November 3rd, 1975.
Yeah.
And we bought a little daytime AM radio station.
KADE.
Don't you remember those?
KADE.
KADE.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, that's where KGNU is now.
Oh, in that same space, isn't that right? Yeah.
When we moved here, that's where the radio station was, and then later on KGNU took over that space. But
you started the Friday afternoon Oldies Club, the first Oldies. Was it the first Oldies show in America?
Well, no, it wasn't the first Oldies show in America, but I mean it was the first and maybe only real program that we had on the air at that time that had any significant listeners. But we played all the music from the 50s and 60s, and it was great. You remember that, don't you?
Yeah, and now that's KBCO
AM. Well, it became KBCO AM, and then we acquired the FM station from Bob Wilkinson in 1977, and that became KBCO FM. And then, I don't know, as these things goes on, it's sort of incestuous, but J-Corps ultimately bought the radio station that we sold to Noble Broadcasting.
Right.
And then turned around and made a contribution to the University of Colorado.
Yeah.
And that's the old KADE.
Picture in the paper today.
Is that right? I didn't see it.
One of the newspapers.
Really?
So they've signed the deal, and the University of Colorado now has your old radio station.
Our old radio station, that's right. Yeah.
I want to ask you about KBCO, because it became one of the most famous award-winning radio stations in the country before you sold it. When you sold it for, an enormous amount of money at the time. What was it, $27 million, something like that? And there was no other station in the country that sold for that except for maybe one in Chicago or something?
Well, I think it had the record in Denver. It certainly didn't have the record sales price in the country. I mean, during that period of time, Jan, radio stations were selling $50, $60 million. It was getting to be over. I mean, it was really getting to be sort of, out of my league. And unfortunately, I think that it's, the radio industry, the radio business has changed so dramatically. And I'm not sure that it's really changed all that much for the better.
Now, you say that you don't like pop music, you listen to classical, yet you put together a very successful radio station like KBCO and then turn right around and do it again with the Peak.
No, wait a minute. No, I'm not that talented. What I was able to do, I think, was put together a lot of good people who had a common goal and a common objective, and were really sort of the talent from the standpoint of being able to judge the market, understand the new music and all that. I mean, if there's any talent that I have, it's putting together a good team of people.
That's what I was going to ask you. What did you do when you were at KBCO? Because you used to be there pretty regularly, right?
Oh, I spent an awful lot of time.
What went on in Mr. Greenlee's office?
Well, of course, what went in my office was a lot of no's to people who wanted to do this, that, or the other thing, or wanted to spend money that we didn't have on one thing or another. But, God, that's an awful good question. I imagine that one of the reasons I liked it so much is that no 2 days were necessarily the same.
Did you sell? Were
Particularly
you
in
out
the
selling
evening.
advertising?
Oh, yeah. Ray Skibitsky and I used to
Call on customers?
Well, largely, we would call on the ad agencies in Denver rather than individual clients. The only individual clients that I guess that I spent a lot of time with were Barry Fay at Fayline, a very big advertiser. I'm trying to remember, we had a couple of others during that period of time, but mostly ad agencies.
Oh, so
you know that game.
Well, yeah, of course. I've worked in radio
Yeah.
before, but there are a lot of people that will be watching this show in Denver, and they figured if he's got Greenlee there, let's find out how did he do it.
God, Jen, I remember you.
Oh, here we go.
Long
That's
time
another
ago.
one of these.
I remember you when you had hair, I think.
Yeah, that's right. When I first got here, we cut it.
Yeah.
I shave it up here.
And mine was probably a little darker than it is now.
Yeah, dark hair. Okay, let's talk, now that we got over that stuff, let's talk about, being mayor. Let's talk about that or Congress. Let's talk about Congress, huh?
Whatever. Hey, it's your show.
I know.
Isn't that what it said? Jann Scott show?
Jann Scott Live. I have
Well.
a cold tonight, so I'm not.
I'm just getting over one.
Are you?
Yeah, well, the
I'm not-
bad thing is they last a couple weeks, so you're going to have to put up with it for a
How's
while.
it been going as being mayor? Have you had any, has Evan Rabbits come up yet and started yelling at you?
I think Evan is in Florida.
Did he move?
No,
Yay!
no, I think Evan goes down during the winter months. He's sort of like, a lot of people from the Midwest to go to Florida during cold weather. It's been great.
It's been civil.
Huh?
It's been civil.
Yeah.
The meetings have been civil.
Well, I tell you, one thing is we have not had a lot of real contentious issues so far. We've had kind of light agendas, and that always helps in terms of getting meetings conducted efficiently and on time.
Traffic lights, you came out in the press the other day, you were saying, let's get these traffic lights straightened out, which is something both myself and half the community here in Boulder have been going nuts over. The traffic lights, you can't turn left, and it's like, what, did they run out of money or what? So what's going on with that?
Well, I think we've been told for a long period of time that, we were somewhat behind the time in the software programs that we had to run the hardware programs that run the lights, and somehow miraculously we were able to find a few $1,000s to buy a new program that's supposed to make things better, and they're experimenting with it along 47th Street, so we'll see.
That's one of the things that people laugh at our community about. You can't have a timed light system. I mean, every other city in America has one. Denver has one. Longmont's got one.
Well, yeah, it's been a topic of discussion for as long as I've been here, and it seems like we might be able to do a better job than we've been doing.
I mean, that left-hand turn arrow at Folsom and Pearl, where if you're headed west on Pearl, you want to turn left on Folsom. I mean, more people have been killed and in serious bad wrecks.
But yeah,
At that, and
But
they
of
finally put
course,
an arrow in there.
you're riding your bike, so you're looking at it from a bicyclist perspective, right?
I'm driving a car. Turn left to go home. Yeah,
You want to make that admission
of course.
live and on the air?
Yeah.
Well, me too. I've
Yeah.
certainly sat in enough traffic to both here and in other places. I sometimes think that we believe that there are always simple solutions to complex problems, and timing the traffic lights may not be the ultimate answer to our congestion problems in the city.
For a guy who's a successful, efficient businessman, how do you work in politics? Because the city of Boulder moves pretty slowly when you're trying to get something done, and Congress is even going to be. What politics? It takes forever to get stuff done.
That's a good point,
Yeah.
and I prefer not to be considered a politician. That's a label that others, I suppose, put on one who runs for office. I would prefer to be considered a citizen legislator. Doesn't that have a nicer ring to it than politician? Well, anyway, I don't know.
No, yeah.
The whole thing is that, as you indicated, I've been on the council a long time, and certainly had my number of frustrations in dealing with issues and that kind of thing. But I think that's what really attracts me to it, is that when we came to Boulder, when we bought the radio station, that was a bankrupt operation.
Right.
And I, for whatever reason, I think that I'm particularly good at kind of analyzing, sizing up situations, trying to apply basic common sense to a lot of things. And I think that has served me well in private business as well as in government. I certainly don't agree with a lot of things that we are doing both at the local level, the state level, and the federal level.
With yourself at the helm as mayor, you think things are running a little more efficiently in the city of Boulder?
Again, I think it has more to do so far with the fact that we haven't had a lot of contentious issues to deal with. But, you know, I try to keep people fairly on track because our conversations sometimes wander. Have you ever noticed that?
City council meetings, it's one of the reasons I tune them out. I'm like, please, geez, give me a break.
I mean, we start going down this path, and then all of a sudden we go here and here and here, and pretty soon it gets out of control. I have worked with most of my fellow council members trying to say, look, we need to bring, I think, a bit more discipline to what we do and how we do it. And so far, this new group realized we have 4 new council members. And so it's been pretty good. I'm proud of them.
As a Republican, you are loved and accepted in Boulder. I mean, I think, are you the only Republican on city council?
I may be the only Republican in Boulder. I don't know.
And you guys do not play partisan politics there?
Not supposed to.
And you've been reelected time and time again to city council. So people, I mean, that issue of whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or a socialist or Marxist or whatever libertarian doesn't even come up in city politics much, does it?
Not directly. I think indirectly it does, because I think in order to sort of be a Republican anymore, you have to have certain principles that kind of guide you in terms of your willingness to be a member of that party. And I think I share a lot of the philosophical views that the party shares. So yeah, from that standpoint, I'm a pretty straight-line Republican.
What are some of the things you're going to do in Congress? Why should the people of Boulder vote for you for Congress?
Well, for several reasons. I think, of course, you may dispute this, and others may as well. But as I've said earlier, you know, I try to bring some practical kind of common sense, bottom line kind of experience to problem solving. I don't think we have a lot of that in the Congress. By and large, those who run for Congress, a lot of them have law degrees. A lot of them have spent a lot of time in other legislative capacities, are sort of, they're involved in politics, almost immersed in politics. And I think someone who kind of comes from a different background and experience can look at issues and look at problems and perhaps find better solutions than what we've come up with so far. I think we look to government too often to solve problems, and I don't think we can do that. I don't think that government is capable of solving problems as efficiently as local people making local decisions about things.
When you say the word Republican in a town like Boulder, images of Newt Gingrich, Rush Limbaugh come to mind. What comes to mind when you say the word Republican, or how does it apply to you?
Well, I suppose...
Or essentially, what are your politics?
I suppose some of those same images come to mind. On the other hand, I look at it more philosophically in terms of, you know, basic principles, I guess, if you will, which are that, you know, we really truly need some economic discipline, and have for a long period of time. I think we need to diminish the rhetoric that we have in terms of creating class warfare. Certain members of Congress who are probably going to be intended candidates for president at some point in time, I think, needlessly spend a lot of time in developing envy between classes of people. And we need to I guess the bottom line for me is we need to deal realistically with the problems that we have as a nation. And that, yes, politics does play a role in that, and there are different views and different people have different opinions. But at least my life experiences tell me that there are ways to address and attack problems with looking to meaningful solutions rather than obfuscate the truth, which is oftentimes what happens. Look at the President's State of the Union address. I mean, it's
I didn't touch Monica. He didn't say that.
Well, no, Monica didn't come up. But I mean, the issues that he talked about there are important issues for the nation. And yet I think there's a lot of disingenuous comments that were made with regard to, you know, the problems that we have with balanced budgets, deficits and the whole thing.
Bob Greenlee, our mayor, is with us. He's running for Congress. The number here is 440-3572. If it's the 18th, you can call us if you have any questions for Bob Greenlee. We are live here Wednesday on the 18th. If it's not Wednesday the 18th, then you can also call the Jaw line and leave your comments. But he'll be with us for a little bit, and if you have any questions for him, we've got him in, wide open. This is uncensored talk television right here in Boulder only. Bob Greenlee, our mayor, running for Congress. What do you think? Are you going to vote for him or not? You voted for him for city council. Are you going to put him into Congress? Let's talk about taxes. How are you going to cut taxes, and what programs would you cut in order to, you're talking about balancing the budget, or how are we going to, you don't want to increase taxes, is that it, or do you want to cut taxes?
Right now, at least at the federal level, we are paying, as a nation, the highest federal tax rates than we've paid in the last 50 years since World War II. Tax rates are far too high right now. Mm-hmm. But I think even more than that, we have a disgraceful tax system in this country. I went to a meeting, I was telling you before your show started, that I went down to a meeting today that Dick Armey, the majority leader in the House, and Representative Dan Schaefer from Colorado's, I believe, 6th Congressional District, hosted today. And the discussion and debate was about whether or not we should look at some kind of a sales tax to replace the federal income tax, or a modified flat tax, or some other system. But I think almost everybody that I've talked to has said one way or another, there's something wrong with the system that people don't understand and don't respect, that now consists of over 7.5 million words of interpretation, that seems to be filled with all kinds of special interest pieces here and there that people don't understand. It's a disgraceful system, and we need to find some way to either replace what we have or make it more understandable so that more and more people respect it.
Are you in favor of flat tax?
I think the flat tax, I don't know that I've come down on any one side. I've come to this conclusion that what we have is not working, and that the Internal Revenue Service has become an agency almost out of control, and that we need to do something about dismantling the entire system in order to get at the problem. But if you go back to the first thing that I said, which is that I think federal tax rates are far too high, the highest in our nation's history. We need to allow people to have more of their own money to spend and to invest, and not necessarily look to Washington, D.C. and Potomac River bureaucrats to somehow answer the needs and problems that we have. We need to begin to dismantle some of what we have.
What's the district that you're running in? What's the geographic district?
Good question, and it's very confusing. The 2nd Congressional District is all of Boulder County, all of the 2 little mountain counties of Gilpin and Clear Creek, about the northern third of Jefferson County, with the exception of the city of Golden, and a very westernmost portion of Adams County. That's the 2nd Congressional District.
Now, David Skaggs gave up his seat this year, and he was a Democrat, right? No?
Yes.
Yes, he was a Democrat.
Right.
And then you're a Republican to fill that seat, and then there will be some other Democrats running, or who are you running against?
There are, I believe, 5 announced Democratic candidates.
That's right, Nichols.
Gene Nickel, Mark Udall, the Jefferson County District Attorney, Dave Thomas.
Oh, yeah.
Let me see, I'm forgetting all of them. Former Boulder County Commissioner Homer Page, and also served on City Council. Yeah, he's announced.
He has announced that he's running.
Yeah.
All right, okay, so you're going to, well, this should be interesting.
And Paul Weissman, I think he likes to be considered more of a bartender from Louisville than anything, but Paul is running as well.
Let's talk about overpopulation in Colorado, lack of water. We have estimates are as much as 10,000 people a month are moving to the Front Range. We're building a lot of houses, and we don't have enough water, some say, to take care of them. I know, like in Aurora and areas like that, they've built some housing developments where they only have water rights for 12 years because Two Forks Dam wasn't put in. We didn't build another aqueduct here, so if we get hit with a drought, we're going to be out of water, or we're going to be out of water anyway. So overpopulation, urban sprawl, and water.
Biggest issues of the Front Range, no question about it. And I suppose you can line up in one of two camps, which is, I'm not comfortable in either camp, which is the sort of the total no-growth scenario. We don't want the area to change in any way. Let's try to cease and prohibit any future expansion or growth and in any way, and I suppose, and that is one camp. The other camp is, well, the land is here, it's available, and we'll find the water. It may be expensive, but let's just go and sort of build everything that we can wall to wall. As you might expect, I somewhat fall in the middle in that debate and have dealt with these issues in the city of Boulder for the last 14, 15 years. Somewhere in the middle, I think, are the answers to these matters, and it comes down to sort of intelligent or smart growth as opposed to just rampant and unencumbered growth. We've got to make sure that the infrastructure is in place that makes sense. We don't always have that. We see these leapfrog developments occur within communities who are all competitive with one another. I mean, we in the city of Boulder are really competitive, our competitors outside the area now are taking more and more of our retail sales tax base away from us. And so every community has its own needs and own interests, and selfish sometimes. We need to do a better job at regional planning, putting the infrastructure in place, transportation, everything. And I don't think we're doing an adequate job of that, and I'm not sure that we're ever going to be able to do it.
We've done it here in Boulder, sort of, although things are.
We've done it probably on a longer period of time here in Boulder, and maybe have more experience with it. On the other hand, we have created some problems for ourselves in doing that. We now have this imbalance in terms of affordability and housing in the city of Boulder that we're trying to compensate by essentially having more and more taxpayer funds being used to offset this tremendous escalation in housing prices in the community in an attempt to try to keep workers in the community.
How should people view you? I read that you consider yourself a fiscal conservative.
Very fiscally conservative. And all you need to do is go ask anyone who's ever worked for me.
And socially, where are you? How do you fall in there?
I suppose more of a social moderate as opposed, these labels sometimes fall apart in any kind of continuum, but I suppose that's as good a definition as any.
Well, I'm hoping that maybe in this TV show people can kind of get to know you and see, rather than the label. I don't know.
And that's the problem. Labels are not always helpful. On the other hand, those are the convenient ways in which we identify people, and when we look to electing people to represent us, that's the kind of decisions that people have to make. And
some people say that Tim Wirth sold out the state of Colorado to the cable industry, that he became controlled by the cable industry, and that the public kind of got screwed. Public access, we're sitting in a public access facility here. A lot of cities across the nation lost their public access. We, of course, in Boulder have one of the best systems because we have 3 different channels, and so how do you see your relationship with the cable industry if you go to college?
I sort of grew up around the cable industry, being in broadcasting, and always thought from the beginning it was a phenomenon. And interestingly, the whole cable industry grew up within several hundred miles of where we are right now. I mean, this all started in the rural areas of Wyoming and western Nebraska when you couldn't get TV signals, and so these fellows would go up and put an antenna up on a hill somewhere and wire the city. And
Bill Daniels, yeah.
Exactly. That's where it all started. And you're right, Tim Worth did serve as a member of the House on the Telecommunications Subcommittee during the time that the Bell system was broken up. Do you remember those decisions? And,
Oh, yeah.
And I think a lot of the favorable legislation that allowed the cable systems to grow and develop. I've known Tim for a number of years, and I consider him to be a friend. I think he's a bright, intelligent guy. I don't agree with his politics. I've told him that. That would not shock him in any way. I got to know him when he was dealing with issues related to telecommunications and broadcasting. And at that period of time, I was among many who felt that we were over-regulating the industry.
Let's take a call. Let's get one call here, and this is a hot shot call. It's from Carter. Must be Carter Johnson.
Oh, it's got to be.
Hey, Carter, you're on the air.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, Mayor Greenlee, I was sort of interested in your thoughts on Regent Sievers sort of bringing up the missing link concept on the Flatirons property out of the blue during the city CU meeting that just came up. Is the missing link, in your mind, an essential part of the infrastructure, or is it going to basically create a boom in housing along the Arvada corridor?
Just to define, Carter probably knows what is being referred to as the missing link, and it essentially is a part of the roadway of 47th Street that would link up with Highway 93, traversing the University of Colorado's property, or the former Flatirons property. That has been on the drawing board one way or another and completely eliminated and eradicated over a long period of time. There are many of us, myself included, I must admit, who think that that kind of link would be very helpful and beneficial because there is so much traffic now by the traffic counts where people are trying to access Highway 93. In order to do so, coming down 47th, it's necessary for them to travel west across Table Mesa and then make a right-hand turn on Broadway. And there's an awful lot of vehicle miles traveled.
What do you think, Carter? Good idea?
Well, I'm not so sure it's a good idea. I have a feeling it's going to create a large housing development, probably in the area that Arvada has annexed almost all the way up to Rocky Flats. And I think that's probably part of the impetus for some of the people who are in political positions to basically bring that item up again at this time.
Right,
let me tell Carter why I think he's wrong. First of all, through that corridor from south of 47th to that link at 93, almost all of that land is either now owned by the university or is City of Boulder or county open space. There can be no housing subdivisions built along that particular section. As far as building in Arvada, again, that's in Jefferson County. There are plans for this so-called Jefferson Center that I think are of concern to many of us, myself included. I think that's an inappropriate place to have that high-intensity kind of development, but most of it seems to be commercial as opposed to residential.
Some people are concerned that if we build it, it'll just the intensity of traffic will it be even more than it was and bring more people here.
I don't know. Yeah, I've heard that argument so many times. We build a highway and people are going to all of a sudden sort of get in their cars on Sunday and say, "Oh, let's go to Boulder and drive on the new road."
They do that anyway.
Maybe they do. I think there are ways to provide pressure reliefs in the city in terms of congestion. This might be one of them, but. Carter, it's been on the drawing board and eliminated so many times it is off the drawing board now. And Bob Sievers did bring it up at this meeting we had yesterday with the regents and the University of Colorado.
Thanks for your call there, Carter.
Thank you.
It's not on anybody's radar screen.
Is that hotel at 9th and Canyon going to get built this time, do you think? Is it?
Well, I tell you, if there is one example of an outrageous performance on the part of City of Boulder in terms of handling a land use matter and so forth, that's got to be it. I mean,
you know what people are upset about? Is they're upset that build too many high buildings and you can't see the mountains from downtown. You can't see the Flatirons.
Well, of course, we've addressed, to some extent, height limitation because the voters put into effect the 55-foot height limitation.
We've got all these buildings that get the variances to that, don't we? I mean, some of those things look like they're just right in the way.
Oh, no.
No?
I can assure you that's a perception rather than a reality.
Yeah.
But on the 9th and Canyon thing, I don't know, Jan. It's just we ought to resolve something. We ought not to let the thing go on unresolved. What has it been, 12 years? And I don't know whether, maybe 10 years ago a hotel there would have been economically viable. I don't know that it is today.
Are you going to, or will you have to retire as mayor and city council member to run for Congress? What works?
Not to run. What I've said is that I have a primary.
Mm-hmm.
We have a primary to go through in August of this
Yeah.
year. We're continuing to assess our position and how things are moving forward, and I'm very encouraged with things right now.
So you don't have to resign as a city council person?
No, as a matter of fact, our charter would even allow me or anyone to serve in some other capacity and still be a member of council.
So, no kidding, you could be a congressman and the mayor?
You could be president.
It'd
You could be a TV talk show host.
You could be mayor, congressman,
Yeah, czar.
Czar,
Yeah.
Greenlee.
Yeah.
Greenlee.
There's no prohibition.
You talked to Kobe last night at City Council. He showed up. So what are your impressions with him and the job they're doing?
With
and all
Tom?
that? Yeah.
Well, I like Tom a lot as an individual. I was here during the period of time and was asked to interview him at the time that he was hired. I'm very impressed with Tom. I think he's a very dedicated, thoughtful public servant. He brought the concept of community policing to Boulder. And hasn't been that warmly received in all quarters, but I think that Tom is an extremely sensitive, tuned-in professional. And I feel for him and a lot of the people in the department who have taken so many shots from the media and so forth. And let me tell you a little story about how it came to pass that he showed up at a meeting last night.
Yeah.
There was an editorial in the Denver Post last week, I think it was Thursday, that in so many words accused the Boulder Police Department of being one of the most incompetent departments in the country. Or
Chuck
something.
Green's written that editorial at least a dozen times in the past year, but
Well,
but
I read it again and I was very upset with what I had read. And I called the city manager and I said, you know, I'm thinking about writing a letter to the editor in response. And I thought then again, well, I don't know how much impact that's going to have, but maybe this is a springboard that we can use to sort of have Tom come into the meeting and have the council ask questions of him and for him to provide some kind of response, just kind of a gut response to all this criticism. So he had some prepared remarks and came last night, and we gave him an opportunity to speak, and then we asked questions. And, you know, my heart goes out to the guy and all the men and women in the police department who have suffered through an awful lot. Tom has been gracious enough and courageous enough to admit that mistakes were made. To the extent that these mistakes are going to have an impact on the outcome, I don't know. It may be too early to tell. If that did happen, I've always maintained that we need some kind of accountability for the department in the way this investigation was handled from the beginning and conducted. But, you know, I think we need to give these guys a little bit of slack.
Well,
I think they're trying awful hard.
Yeah, they
And-
got hit in the media frenzy. I mean, someone pointed out to me the other day that there were 73% of the murders in Denver went unsolved last year, and I think Boulder's always had at least 50 or 60%.
Right.
But I know they've gotten hammered by. I mean, you know, 2 years ago it was Rush Limbaugh attacking Leslie Durgan, you know, for the homeless.
Oh, the
march-
homeless. Yeah, I
marching.
remember that. Yeah.
And,
Well, but you know, you've been around. The city of Boulder is always under someone's microscope.
Absolutely.
And that's fine. That's okay. But as I pointed out to Tom again last night, as I have in private, that sometimes when some of these outrageous things have been said, I think it would have been better, personally, for us as a community to come out and correct the errors that have been made. Because we give legs to these erroneous stories sometimes. And then, as I said last night, they become centipedes, you know. I mean,
Hey, you know, we've tried. I mean, I've sat here. I've been involved in talk radio in Denver, and we've done some TV shows on this stuff. And I watched Alex Hunter went on Mike Rosen one day. They just chewed him to pieces. I mean, so anytime somebody from Boulder tries to correct the Denver or the national news media about, you know, just a second here, this is a pretty good community, and we have a lot of creative, cutting-edge things that we're doing. It doesn't matter; they don't want to hear it. You know, if you're the abused child in the family, the rest of the family is going to continue to abuse you. It seems like that. We're like the abused child of the nation.
Well,
Maybe that
I
sounds
think
like
we in the
whining.
community, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think we've seen a kind of an ugly side to contemporary journalism as a result of this. I mean,
Yeah, evil.
yeah, I mean, a really dark side of journalism. And all the business with what's been happening nationally, initially this rush to judgment about what the president did or didn't do.
Yeah.
And then sort of, I saw the press kind of back away from where they were early on in this story. And you probably can guess, I'm not a great fan of Bill Clinton's
I couldn't
or
guess
the
that.
Democrats, but I think the guy, in the early days of this was very mistreated by the press and grave concerns about the concept of special prosecutors and creating almost another branch of government. I mean, I think there's something wrong here. But anyway,
Yeah.
got off track. Sorry.
Kobe will be going by the end of the year.
Tom said that he's going to be leaving by the end of the year.
He's going to have an arrest, according to the paper, within 3 months of the
No, I think
resignation?
what he said last night is that they are either going to in the next 3 months, and I have always thought that around the 1st of June, somewhere in that time period, the department would be able to wrap up its investigation with all the evidence that they've been able to ascertain, all the analysis that they've been able to do. They will either be able to make an arrest on their own, or they're going to have to put this case pretty well closed at that point, turn that material over to the district attorney for him to consider what he wants to do with it.
As mayor, are you privy to the case? To what's
I
going on?
actually, I could be, and I've asked not to be.
You've asked not to be.
Yeah.
Just let the police department do their job.
Well, I thought there's always this potential of sort of saying something or releasing information that you might be privy to that would not be helpful. There's already been enough of that, so I have from the very beginning told Tom and everyone else, don't tell me things. I mean, I'll ask questions, but don't tell me things
yeah.
that are sort of, under investigation. But
Yeah. Well, Bob Greenlee, thank you for coming
Hey,
by. Bob
it's good to see you again, Jan.
Running for Congress coming up in November, right?
yeah, well, first of all, the primary is August 11th, and then the general election will be November 3rd.
Next, we're going to talk about media. They're called Rocky Mountain Media Watch. They sue the 4 stations in Denver. They're actually protesting their license renewals, Channel 4, 7, 9, and 2. And this is Rocky Mountain Media Watch. Now, if you have a look at this upcoming video, this is an interview that Paul Kleit did with Channel 9 last night, and then we'll talk more about this. But first, here's a little intro that Channel 9 itself did on a guy who's suing them, the only TV station in Denver to actually cover this as a news story.
Commissioners wanting to challenge the renewal process this year had to file by March 2nd. Rocky Mountain Media Watch filed its documents today. 9 News reporter Mark Kobrick has more on the group. Mark, why is Media Watch challenging the licenses of the Denver stations?
Jim, they contend that our coverage is not balanced, that we tend to focus more on trivial stories or violent stories and not the news of the day. Paul Kleit speaks for Media Watch here in Denver. He is filing today, brought questions from reporters and media groups all over the country.
Well, we've done 7 surveys.
Paul Kleit is a former physician. His phone was ringing nonstop this morning, as if he was still the busiest practitioner in town. Having left medicine behind, however, Kleit now considers himself an expert on the ills of television news, dispensing diagnoses on what he labels the bad news about electronic journalism.
We're contending that the news is out of balance, and like an unbalanced diet, it's unhealthy.
Unhealthy, he claims, because it's a steady diet of crime, commercials, mayhem, and fluff. It is those elements that Kleit and his colleagues look for in a survey of 100 television stations across the country. How did we stack up in that group here in Denver? Well, for time devoted to coverage of crime, Channel 7 ranked in the top 10 out of those 100 stations. Channel 2 ranked 34th, Channel 9 63rd, Channel 4 was in the 76th spot. For rankings for coverage of mayhem or stories about disaster, terrorism, and war, Channel 7 ranked 19th, Channel 2 32nd, Channel 4 was 49th, and Channel 9 was 83rd. Clyde says it all points to an excess of one kind of news.
And what we're finding, of course, is that half the news, on average, is about violent topics. I say that's unhealthy.
Gary's Mike.
We can tell you that here at Channel 9, there is no conscious effort to inundate you with violence and tasteless stories. There is an editorial process that determines the news of the day.
You know, it's about the FCC relicensing the
Violence is always an issue in any newsroom, and I have all the confidence in the world that the editorial process here is on the mark, is objective, and every day there is a spirited competition among stories as to whether they make the air or not.
Roll your break.
A competition for the best stories, stories just like this one. Roger Ogden also points out that while the study does make our industry look pretty much like the bad guy, here at Channel 9 and generally in Denver, we welcome scrutiny, we are very open to criticism, and generally, Jim, we are always working to make things just a little bit better.
Mark, you mentioned the challenges to those broadcast licenses. What's the next step in that process?
Channels 2, 4, 7, and 9 have 30 days to respond to the document filing today. The petitioner then has 15 days to rebut, and then it is all in the hands of the FCC.
All right, Mark Kobrick, thanks very much.
Back here in studio, Jann Scott live. So, too much violence in television is in TV news is kind of the topic. Rocky Mountain Media Watch suing the four local Denver television stations. This is serious business. They could lose their licenses. And we had some interviews. Next, we're going to talk with Paul Clyte with Rocky Mountain Media Watch. We talked with him earlier today, and he goes on quite a bit talking about his why and what the key issues are. We then talked to Channel 7, Channel 4, Channel 9, and get some responses, and the responses are really pretty interesting because most of the TV stations are saying, oh no, we don't use, see, let me see, Rocky Mountain Media Watch, they say that they have some formulas here, okay, that 34%, here it is, 34% of the news is crime reporting. And then it goes on from there. We have that piece ready? All right. This is the interview with Paul Clyte coming up. Man. Crime, 59. Disaster, 13. Weather, 5%. Grammy Awards, 4%. These are percentages, 26% news. So can we go to that Paul Clyte interview now?
Sorry, I didn't have the tape rewound. We're still rewinding it.
Okay.
Apologies.
Okay, so this is Rocky Mountain Media Watch here they're actually in Denver. They've developed and tested a method for analyzing the content of local television newscasts across the U.S. This is their third national survey. They have volunteers have recorded 100 different newscasts on a single evening and sent the videotapes in for analysis. Okay, this is Paul Clyte. This is our talk with him yesterday on the telephone.
All right, we're ready to roll.
Of local television news content that include the Denver stations over the last 4 years. And we find a consistent pattern of newscasts out of balance. Half the news on average is about violent topics, crime, disaster, disaster, war, terrorism. The crime is mostly about murder. There's a huge amount of triviality in the newscast, the chit-chat, the teases, the soft news, the celebrity stories. There's excess of commercials. The Denver stations, on average, have more commercials than the average across the country. There's also underrepresentation of women and minorities in positions of power and stereotyping of them as women as victims, minorities as perpetrators of crime in the newscasts. And together, we contend this constitutes an unbalanced and unhealthy diet of information that night after night, just like any unbalanced diet, takes its toll on people. And it's not in the public interest. It's harming the people of Denver.
Now, how does this violate FCC law?
Well, stations are supposed to act in the public interest. And our contention is that by harming the people, they are not acting in the public interest. You know that with deregulation, there are almost no responsibilities of stations to put on balanced programming, to show both sides of controversial issues, to even air controversial issues. But our contention is that this is harming the people of Denver and is clearly not in the public interest. That's our argument. It's a novel argument.
What's the FCC saying about this so far? Federal Communications Commission.
Well, first of all, there's only 5 members on the FCC, and 4 of them are brand new. So we think this is an interesting opportunity for these new members to acquaint themselves with these issues. The FCC, of course, hasn't said anything and won't for several months. The stations will have a month to respond to our petitions.
Can you tell me a little bit about how Rocky Mountain Media Watch got started and why? And I mean, are you the person who started it?
Yeah, I'm one of the founders of it. Before I did this, I had a nationally syndicated public radio show called Terra Infirma that was on 100 stations around the country and was funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And that experience convinced me of the power of television and the influence of television in our community, and led to the founding of this group to try to find ways to challenge the television industry and the other commercial media to give people better information. And what's evolved is this focus on local TV news, this series of content analyses.
So do you think there's too much violence in TV news? That's the topic. 440-3572. Take your calls here live tonight on the 18th. 440-3572. Paul Kleit appeared on national news shows today. Rocky Mountain Media Watch has brought a suit against 4 TV stations in Denver, and does not want to see them have their FCC licenses renewed. He claims, well, you heard what he had to say. He claims that there's too much violence, that they don't serve the public needs or the public trust, that we're being manipulated by the news in order for the news to essentially suck you in and sell you product. That the news is basically there as a money-making mechanism for local television station. They're not there to deliver the news. Okay, second interview coming up is, let's see, this is us trying to reach John Suter, who is the general manager at Channel 2 in Denver. Oh, hi. Hey, this is Jann Scott calling for Steve Grunt. I was hanging there for 5 minutes on hold.
I think he was just going to pick up. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Carl, I'm the assistant news director. Steve's on the line with someone else right now.
Aha.
But
Okay, what's your name? I'm sorry.
that's okay. It's Carl Bielik. I'm the assistant news director.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
So you know what I'm calling about?
Yeah, about the Rocky Mountain Media Watch.
Yeah, and we're doing a TV show on it tomorrow night at 8:30, and I'm inviting the news directors or general managers of all the 4 stations plus Rocky Mountain Media Watch to be on the program for have a roundtable discussion. So.
Yeah. No, I understand. I can tell you that I have to defer to our general manager, and as does Steve. And so what I can do is pass along your message to him.
Oh, who is that? John Suderman?
John Suter.
John Suter.
Yeah, Suder.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, 7 News.
Hi, is Cindy there, please? Is she in, or is she at lunch?
She's at a meeting for 2 days, a manager's meeting.
Oh, she's at a meeting.
Yes. Call is being answered by Audix. Melissa Cleansing is not available. To leave a message, wait for the tone. Otherwise, for...
Oh, hi, is John there, please?
Can I tell him who's calling?
Yeah, this is Jann Scott.
In just a moment.
Jann Scott here.
John Suter.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Fine, how about you?
Pretty good. You know, I do a television show here in Boulder.
Oh, I know. I got your phone mail, and you just called, and I couldn't get to you, and I was listening to your phone mail as you were calling.
Oh, okay.
But I declined to attend.
Okay. And why is that?
And I have no comment, Jan, so thank you very much.
Why won't you...
No comment, Jan.
So you don't want to talk about this?
Jan, I have no comment.
See, you guys are dodging the issue.
Pardon me?
I said you're dodging the issue then.
I have no comment, Jan.
Well, but why are you dodging the issue? I mean, the public has a right to...
And I have no comment. Thank you.
How you guys do the news. John Suter, well, we upset him. Some of the questions we were asking people, well, you'll see as we go along, the percentage of violence that they have in the news, do they use mayhem formulas, those sorts of things. Got a live call here. We'll take it. Art, hi, you're on the air. What do you think about television news and violence?
Well, I had heard of this before, and I thought, oh, boy, they're going to finally clean up the TV news at night.
Yeah.
And it wasn't what I thought it was. When I come home and I sit down and I watch the news, the first thing I hear is Bronco babble or Rocky's this or some other sports thing. I think there's entirely too much sports stuff. Is he including that as part of the news?
Well, yeah, sports, and, when the... Sports is part of the makeup. What's missing in the makeup are environmental issues, local politics, things like urban growth and education. All of those issues generally don't make the 10 o'clock news. They'll make an earlier news time, but they won't make the main news.
Yeah, it's very difficult for one central station to talk about all the little issues going on. In Boulder, what do they talk about? The Ramsey case, generally. And
Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Sex, violence.
But all this sports stuff, it just sits there and it irks me. It's free advertising for the Bronco franchise.
What would you rather see? What would you like to see on the news?
I would like to hear more of what's going on in Denver, what the problems of DIA are, some in-depth reporting. There's no more in-depth reporting.
Civic issues.
Somebody says if you want to get an in-depth reporting, you got to go buy the book.
Yeah. All right, Art. Thanks
that's all I had to say.
Thanks for your call.
Thank you.
440-3572. Is there too much violence in the news? The next segment we go to here is... now this is an unnamed television executive. This is a guy it's a big TV exec in Denver. He was pretty upset, so we decided not to use his name. But a lot of these guys did not want to talk about violence in television news, and they wanted to shy away from the issue. And it goes to show you about the kind of people that run television news. I mean, we've been talking about this for some time. I think that, they're interested in selling the news to you so that you watch it, and they can make money off their advertisers. Watch this. Where the numbers on the amount of violence and murders and that kind of stuff that's used in newscasts. Can you tell me about how you break down your newscasts? Do you have a formula for what you?
No, absolutely not. We just try to apply the best judgment we can every day to what is available through us, through a variety of sources of information and pictures, and make the best judgments we can.
Okay. What about the idea, the Pavlov theory of, going for emotional responses as a way to hold viewers, either through, dramatic music, just like, say, dramatic music as an example, underlining, things to come up?
Well, we don't use any music as generally as soundtracks in our newscasts, associated with, serious reporting.
With stories?
The question is.
All right.
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about or what you're referring to there, Jen. No, we don't do a lot of snap zooms or that kind of stuff to just to catch people's eye. In fact, this is a market where the level of videography and videotape editing is very, very high, as you're aware. You're the premier market in the country for videographers, so. No, we're not doing a lot of that kind of stuff. Has won the National Press Photographers Association Award 4 or 5 times for best, best photographers. They've won the Photographer of the Year award several times. We won the Photographer of the Year award last year. Channel 7 has won, this similar award. So the art is practiced at a very high level here in Denver. Yeah, we think we do a very good job of balancing what is the day's news and what are often some tough stories to have to report, like the Susanna Chase story in Murder in Boulder, against other issues that are serious issues of the day.
Like the the news hour on Channel 6, but I'm thinking something maybe headed toward those lines.
Jan, you're asking me questions I don't know what you're talking about down in Austin, so I can't make the comparison. I don't think our newscasts are fluffy.
All right. Okay, I got one more question. The percentage of commercials...
Are you recording me?
Yeah.
Well, you didn't tell me that before we went on the Jan. You can't use anything that... You did not inform me that you were recording.
Do I have to?
Well, if you're ethical, you have to. Of course you do. And if you want to consult with an attorney about what the FCC rule is regarding recording and then rebroadcasting it, I would advise you to do that.
Why? You guys...
But you do whatever you want.
You guys do it all the time.
That's the end of this conversation. You go back and listen to that tape, and your tape, and you never informed me that you were recording this conversation.
I know, but you guys walk in with secret cams all the time.
We never record anybody over the telephone unless we have told them ahead of time that we were doing that.
Yeah, maybe not, but you walk in with secret cams and put people on the air whether they like it or not. Tell me you don't do that. You know what I mean? You will go to any length to get a story, whether it's hidden cam or not. That's another issue, the issue of hidden cams. Gone. Yeah, there you go. No, you don't have to tell anybody. That guy's on the record. I told him about 2 months ago. Every interview I do, on the record. There's no off the record. These guys are sneaky bastards, and they don't like it when we do it to them. I'm Jann Scott. We'll continue this next week. Also, Tom Kobe, our police chief, is going to be here.